Hello, my guest today is Noemi, a model and performance artist living in London. She studied acting in Paris and performance art at Central St. Martin's, and her work has been shown at the Tate, the British Museum, and the Royal Academy of Arts. She's currently doing a funded PhD in performance at University of the Arts London and working on publishing her first novel. When she's not immersed in her creative world, she's cycling around London, teaching yoga, or indulging her love for all things pickled. Thank you for replying to that message that I posted on Instagram about what people would like to, to hear more of on the podcast. And you said this beautiful thing about pain as a portal. It's like such an interesting concept.
It's very, very Eastern European of us to talk about pain.
There's a lot of this, martyr mentality where, especially if you're religious, you have to suffer. You have to.
My relationship with pain has gone through so many different stages because, like you say, I feel like in our cultures, pain is normalized, but there's no concept of working through it and using it as a guide to then experiencing less pain. It's more like, this is what life is like. Let us just steam in our misery and just accept this. And you're like, well, no. Why would you make those choices?
I feel like you have to become aware of it as a concept. Coming to the UK was one thing, and that was already like 15 years ago. Then realizing that it doesn't operate like it does in Bulgaria, and like people think differently. There's more openness to possibilities. And then like now, 15 years later, I have such a different way of thinking. It's incomparable.
Yeah, it's the same for me. It's been 11 years plus 3 years in France.
It's just a mentality difference. It's very, very different. And there are obviously many good things. But also I realized when I was growing up in Bulgaria, didn't interact with anyone. I had no friends really, like very, very limited. And I was just keeping to myself and that kind of thing.
I have the same experience as you, I guess. I didn't have friends through high school and even afterwards, really through drama school. I found it really difficult to connect to people. And I think sometimes when you migrate to a different country, people assume that you're a representation of the culture, but sometimes you've left precisely because you don't find yourself in the dominant culture.
What is identity? Why is like one pull so strong for some people and for others it's something completely different?
When I first came to London, I was working these jobs in stadiums. I was a VIP hostess for.
Oh, I've done that.
Have you?
Have we worked for the same
Did you enjoy those?
No,
Probably.
absolutely not.
I've not seen you there. I know some people who quite enjoyed them. I enjoyed eating copious amounts of foods.
Yeah, of course.
And I remember we had a training, intercultural and anti-racist training, and they prompted us to think, what do we find as a common denominator? Like, what do we connect with? What do we look up in other people to connect with? It showed that so many of us were connecting on the basis of, what do we have in common? Do we come from the same area of London, of other countries? Do we eat similar things? Do we wear similar things? And they suggested to us that maybe we can choose some other things that we can find commonalities in. And I thought, oh, that's great, because actually, whether or not we live in Islington or we come from the Balkans, it's actually not important to me. So why would I find that an easier thing to connect over?
Because that's someone's situation more than their mind, right? Like our situations being similar doesn't have anything to do with our personalities or what we want to achieve in life. It could, but it doesn't necessarily. Though sometimes I have connected with people because they were Bulgarian. I was like, I see you're Bulgarian, let's connect. But also kind of had a feeling that we would have similarities other than being from Bulgaria. And it worked out.
For me, when I chose my therapist, it was important that it was somebody from Eastern Europe because I didn't want to explain my whole culture.
Well, no, because the culture is a part of the way we are now. There's also this belief based off this smarter mindset where everything comes with difficulty or it shouldn't come. Abundance is not a thing.
Oh my God, yes. Abundance does not exist.
So there's been a lot of unlearning I've had to do about that specifically because I love abundance.
I love abundance as well. I join you.
I absolutely love it. And also I believe I deserve it. And this whole thing, like when you go back home, it's just such a disassociation because you can't really have these kinds of conversations, you know.
Since I was a child, I knew quite strongly what I wanted to do, and I knew I wanted to be an artist, and I knew that I wanted to spend my life playing and being silly and subversive and connecting to people. And my parents, they're so loving and well-meaning. I know that. It's just they truly, deeply believe you cannot do what you want. And I remember vividly as a child them telling me, you can't always do what you want, and me saying, I think I can actually. I think I can.
This is giving me such a deja vu, like these words. You can't do what you want, or like you're not good enough, or you need to prove yourself first.
On one side, you can't be ambitious, but on the other side, you also can't take responsibility for failures. Like, I don't know, in my family circle, nobody takes responsibility for the things that they didn't go for, that they could have achieved, but they just didn't really go for. Everything is everybody else's fault.
Because there's no such thing as potential, right? In that kind of mindset. The way we're talking about these kinds of things, you know, people might say, oh my gosh, this is so negative. But you're like unlearning things by seeing what they are for what they are, right? Like there's no potential. So for example, you are contained and the mindset is very contained. However, I do believe that since Bulgaria joined the European Union, I think in 2007, and since people started traveling more freely and going back, seeing different mindsets, different experiences kind of change things. I see a lot of people now who create a lot of possibilities for themselves.
I have a great love for any kind of migrants. So when I was in Bucharest, people that I hung out with were people who were not from Bucharest who would come over. And I think the same in London because you already know something about a person who's had the guts to leave a place, often with very little like finances,
You know,
and throw themselves into a challenge. You already know that that person, you would have something in common with them. That person is brave and embraces failure.
it's a completely different life experience. But when I moved to London, it took a lot of time to be able to work, which also meant that I didn't have any money. These things are like, they're not like pretty to talk about, but I feel like they're important because these were my possibilities at the time.
I grew up with an idea that things, if they're not good and perfect, you don't have the ability to make them so you just have to resign yourself. Whilst I kind of have been trying to do the opposite, to try to make anything pleasant, gamify. You need to trick yourself and gamify yourself to get to a more comfortable place.
You can't do anything. And if you've had that kind of background where it was very different from where you wanted to go, and also financially and all that, like that kind of transformation for me is really important. And that's why I keep saying it because it's all a journey, right? You're always growing, you're always improving. Some people say, no, but you can't. But you can, and you don't need any base. You don't need any stability, what so-called stability. Everyone who's ever transformed their lives is proof that that's possible.
You take the small pain now so you don't have the big pain later, because we're all going to have to go through some sort of discomfort. Choose your discomfort.
Your attitude about life is really important. For example, like when I was just arriving in the UK, my attitude about everything was really negative.
100%. I had the same experience. I was so bitter. And now thinking about imagining myself at that time, I'd be like, if I had a casting, would I hire myself? Then no, I'd be like, I don't want to work with this little bitter girl. I can see why a lot of opportunities didn't stick.
I was just listening to a podcast before about manifestation, about living the life you want as if it's already here. It's not like pretending. It's actually like being happy and positive and a light presence and be daring and going for things that you normally wouldn't go for. I remember having a disassociation with the life I wanted and the life I had, and they felt very separate. If you put something on a pedestal, it's far. It's not achievable because it's far, it's high up. How are you going to get there? But if something is there next to you, present with you, it's a part of your surrounding, it's a part of your existence. It's achievable. These are very different things. And like just recently, did I actually start seeing opportunities and the life I want as something that's within my reach.
Definitely. I think to me, the way I think about it is it just comes down to your nervous system. Do you feel safe or do you feel in a pool of scarcity? And I genuinely believe that scarcity is the root of most problems in the world because that's when you're very reactive. I'm reading a book at the moment about high conflict. That's kind of what you explain when you feel like people can take things away from you, that everything is limited. That's when you have less patience with everyone around you. That's when you feel like they can affect your life in a meaningful way. And what I love about what you're saying about this manifestation is that, in a way, if you do manage to reach a sense of inner safety, in a way, it doesn't matter if what you want to happen, it really decreases the importance of that. So you're more likely to get it if it's not that important to you anymore, because you're more likely to keep going and fail and keep going, because it's not that deep anymore. It's just a play. So even if it never happens, it's fine because you already have the
Something will.
experience of I'm good.
Oh, yeah. So also it's about healing the inner child, because it's always like the inner child, right? That's terrified or that's on edge because of whatever experiences we've had in our childhood. It's always like the little us that needs a lot of soothing. If that person becomes comfortable, then we can become secure at that point as well. I do exercises because you have to heal. It's almost like visualizing this person, you're at whatever age, and seeing them in a moment where they needed protection or whatever the trauma from a person's life is, and seeing them in that moment where they're alone or unloved or needing to prove themselves, and you're like, okay, I've got you, you're safe. And like really being there for them and doing this a lot, because obviously it's not a one-time thing.
I like this idea that almost all of ourselves exist at the same time, and we can travel through time, either to look at our older self to ask for guidance or to look at our younger self and ask for and remember, really.
I was reading this book and it said, if you're lacking confidence in the moment, get it from the future you. See the future you that already is living the life that you want to be living. See how they dress, see how they behave, see how they enter a room, how they walk down the street, how they do day-to-day life, right? Ask them for advice. Ask them to hold your hand and almost be like, guide you to this life that you want to have. If you try it for like a long period of time, it makes such a difference, because the brain can't differentiate reality as in what's outside of the window on the street right now and what you tell yourself. And that's scientifically proven. If you're a visual person and you dream or whatever and you tell yourself things, all that is reality for the brain. If you're telling yourself negative things, or like, it's another shit day today, for example, and then you start the day and you continue with that kind of narrative, the brain is like, okay, well, I guess we're having a shit life now. I will experience that. So if you keep telling yourself that, you see things that align with that thought process. That's another brain thing. So basically, we get so much information, we can only process a tiny fraction of it. And what we process is what's already aligned with our thinking. And that's not woo-woo. That's not a woo-woo thing. That's just like a, scientifically proven thing. So if you think negatively and hate your life, hate your experience, the processed information will be information that aligns with that thinking already.
I completely agree. And to be honest, as an actor, that's always rung so true to me. But for a long time, I didn't know that I could apply that to my life. I knew that I was susceptible to, I would read something like, I'm tired. And then I'd be like, oh, I feel tired. But during the pandemic, I did hypnosis. And then she explained to me how it works really. And it seemed like so obvious that somebody relaxes you through a meditation and then you are susceptible. Now, different people have different levels of susceptibility. I am very hypnotizable, very, again, as an actor, you tell me you are a princess in a castle. I was like, I'm a princess in a castle. And it worked after 3 sessions. And I've been using a lot of sleep hypnosis on an app as well. Basically, if somebody repeats something to you over and over again, it does become your reality. And I realized when I started doing this program called The Artist Way that it asked you to write down your intrusive negative thoughts. And with so much love, I say this, I wrote them down, and then it asks you who said that. And it was my father's, not towards me, because I've actually been so loved as a child, but it was what they say to themselves. And I think with my parents, they didn't make the distinction that they would tell me that I am great and I have potential, but they would talk so badly about themselves that as a child, you know that that's the actual truth. You pick it up and you know that what they say to you is them trying to be nice, but what they believe about the world is what they believe about themselves.
It's like what your parents believe is your belief. That's why I struggled so much when I was little. I'm like, I don't understand this like mentality. It doesn't feel nice.
And it takes so much to resist that.
You're allowed to grow and become better and expand and not be the same you've always been. However, a lot of people never change. Ever.
And that's why I guess my initial thought was pain as a portal, because I feel like I do not romanticize pain. I do not desire pain for me or for anyone around me. But it inevitably does happen every now and then. And it does this thing where it completely splatters everything you thought about yourself, everything you thought about the control that you have in this world. It's so piercing that you have to you can't ignore it, and you have to create something else from it. Not always, like you say. Some people go into, and that's a question I would love to, I'd be so curious to know the answer. Why do some people go into PTSD, and why do people go into post-traumatic growth? People sometimes say, oh, this is woo-woo, comes from a privileged place, but a lot of the writing about this comes from Holocaust survivors, and they talk about the power of mental resilience and the power of creating your reality.
I had a tumor a few years ago. It's one of the things when the diagnosis came, and obviously there's this initial shock, but then after the initial shock, I was the happiest I've ever been in my life. And it's because, you know how we create this wall sometimes where we have these false narratives in our heads and we worry about nonsense, like most of the time. When something real comes, and it's powerful enough, as in bad enough, that wall of false narrative shatters. It's gone. And I remember having this clarity I've never had in my life, maybe even since then. If you've had a false wall that's been like really noisy, that is because like mine was very noisy prior to that. It just shattered. It was gone. One day you just wake up sometimes. Like it happens with some people. It doesn't happen with others, where you suddenly see things clearly. Your false narrative, your false worries disappear. I mean, they're not real.
A thought I just had when I was hearing you say this was, does that need to happen? And I think no, and I'm sure there are people who achieve those states of being without the transformation of pain, but they probably are less likely to want to share about it because of that, because it's probably normal to them. Whereas if you go from the deep pain to a kind of state of ease and lightness, you want to tell everyone about it, because you're like, guys, you don't have to live like this. I just discovered this. Like, it's new to me. Come join me, because I wish somebody told me. Let me tell you.
For them, it's a sudden shift. But then in normal circumstances, it's a process. You work on yourself. You work on yourself. You work on yourself. You start narrating a different story. So yeah, again, this podcast that I was listening to in the morning, she was saying how she also grew up in a negative environment where her family was quite negative and life was kind of fearsome. And she started telling herself, she started talking to herself positively. that little thing really over time changes your reality. And
Yeah.
that's the more painless way to go about change, rather than let's wait for something really traumatizing to happen.
Yeah, because we can just get so fixed in our ways and in our ways of thinking that sometimes it is difficult to change, which is why it's good that it's become in the culture to kind of investigate even when things aren't awful.
So I've met some people, for example, have the theoretical knowledge that something is not right in their life, or they've had trauma they need to work on. They have the theoretical knowledge, and you can see by their behavior that almost like they're not processing it intuitively or deeply. It's almost like there's no capacity there for change. And that's a whole other thing.
I know what you mean, and I'm very curious about that. Because I've met a lot of people who were extraordinarily self-aware, but like you say, their lives reflect the opposite. Whereas I've also met people who maybe don't have that deep level of self-awareness, but they do have an intuitive rhythm.
One is not better than the other. It's just that you have to get to that point where it becomes natural, because until it's natural, it's just whoa, basically.
In some ways, thinking that nothing matters and everything is a choice to me is very freeing. Like, it's not better to live with ease and lightness than to live in pain and fear. It's just my preference. I would rather. So I want to move towards that, but I probably will experience a sort of punishment if I'm still living in fear, but it's not, there is no morality police. I can choose to live a life in scarcity and fear. I just would rather not. I'm not great at remembering quotes, but my favorite quote is by a writer called David Graeber, and he says, "The ultimate truth of life is that it's something that we make up, and we might as well make up differently." Something like that.
I love that.
I love the lightness in that. Just do it differently.
Still unlearning. You can see we're still unlearning. Every time I go back home, I'm saying that as somebody who absolutely loves my family. It's just that they're different. Very different thinking.
I mean, and they've gone through such different things than we have. I think for Western Europeaners, it's difficult to even understand the gap between us and our parents who've lived without freedom of expression and without, like, their choices were truly so limited.
Yeah, well, my grandmother and even my parents lived during socialism. Like my grandmother telling me the stories from where she was growing up, and you have to give people grace because of the life they had and the experiences they had.
For my parents, it maybe even became more difficult after that stopped because, in a way, having such a strong enemy, they were able to find pockets of freedom within that. But afterwards, I think it was really difficult to be given choice after being denied choice for such a long time.
There was no choice. You had no choice over anything. So you had a life, you were given a life. There was a blueprint of how to live your life, and you went on living that life. And then afterwards, you had to pick a life, but nobody was showing you how. Yeah, it was not a good starting point. And that's understandable.
It's funny, the only person I know who lives that kind of abundance is a friend of my mom's who paradoxically is very, very Christian. And she is the only person I have met in my environment in Romania who does have this kind of abundant mentality about her. And you see it in the way she lives and in her friendships and in the way she's brought up her daughter and her granddaughter. Obviously, again, I know so many people who are religious and who have the exact opposite experience of life, but I found it really profound that she did find an anchor for herself to go through all these changes, and that anchor was somehow a deep spirituality that she was able to access, that other people were accessing religion through tradition and through like regulations and rules, and she accessed it through an actual connection with serenity and lightness, and this idea that she doesn't have to carry the burden, that something else is carrying the burden, and she can just be light and playful.
It's almost like, when you look at spirituality, it could be the same look. It's just you might not call it religion. And if you look at it like that as well, there's something that has the answers for me if I just allow it to show them to me. It's all about trust, right? You have trust that something has your back and something is there for you, and things will work out. For some people, that's religion. And it's because like there's something that, that's supposed to be bigger than you. That's kind of aligning things, creating the world. But yeah, it's that trust for a lot of people when they feel like they're alone and it's just them and the world against them almost. It could be a terrifying concept. So you need something to be like, something that's my safe space, something that has my well-being in mind.
I mean, it is a terrifying idea that it would be us against the world. And I feel like it's a kind of activism to challenge that thought.
Opportunities and growth don't happen when we're by ourselves, and that's actually a thing. You need, whether it's one person who's your mentor or like speaking to different people, you need this kind of community.
Definitely. It reminds me of a meme I saw the other day that said, "You're not healed, you've just removed everything that triggers you from your life."
Like we all get triggered, and triggers are just things that show us what more work we need to do. You know?
And what matters to us, because in the end, we don't want to be lobotomized. We're fine to be annoyed. I feel like I'm very emotional and I feel my emotions quite strongly. And sometimes I think I creep my friends off. But I do believe you just need to let it all out and then just move on. Sometimes the more you try to like wash it off and be like, oh, I'm fine, you just keep it in. No, just really tantrum, cry. Just
make yourself cry.
I love that. How do you make yourself cry?
Well, I had this breakup, which wasn't like that long of a relationship. However, it was a breakup. And I was just like, okay, I need to cry. And then I was like, so fine afterwards. But yeah, so that was like one of these situations, like cry, because even if it's not an obvious reaction, you need to have a reaction. It's a shock to the system, right? So you need to react in a healthy way. So you need to have an emotional reaction. That was so clinical.
I love this image of you making yourself cry, listening to Adele.
Well, no, because also we're actors, right? Technically, we can cry on cue. So we're like cueing ourselves. I was cueing myself to cry.